Hi, I'm the PC Expert Amateur, and I am back, and I'm so happy to let you know that I have found what the problem was. Now, when you're troubleshooting, one of the things that you should always do if you have a problem where nothing is powering on is to check all of your connections to make sure that everything is plugged in properly. And so I did that last week, but when I looked again today, I was thinking because I had checked all the power connections and that everything was seated properly and so on and so forth, and nothing was making any difference. And then I thought, well, what what else could possibly cause this to happen when both power supplies are working? So that means it's not the power supply, it's not the cables that came with both power supplies, and you cannot like mix and mingle them like you can with some other parts, because every power just because they're from the same company doesn't mean they're wired the same at the power supplies sockets. At the other end, at the devices you're powering, yes, it's standardized, but at the sockets of each power supply, they are non-standardized. They may be standardized within a product line. They may be standardized across the entire company. But you don't know unless you do the research to find out. So it's always a good idea if you're ordering like extensions, or you're ordering replacements, especially because it's one thing to get an extension because that's going to be standard because you're still using the plug that plugs into the device you're powering. So at that point, it's already standardized, and all you need is a standard extension. But if you're replacing a damaged cable for your power supply, then you have to make sure it absolutely matches the power supply you've got. There's no room for error. You can destroy your power supply. You can destroy the device you're connecting it to. You can have other devices become destroyed or damaged as well. So never play with fire because you're going to get burned. All right, so what I did was I gave consideration to the fact that the light on the power switch wasn't turning on, so I wasn't able to get any LEDs lighting up there, or an LED, right? But there's also the hard drive LED. So theoretically, that might have lit up, but most likely it would not light up if there's something was not getting power. Then there's also LEDs that are supposed to be on the motherboard, but the only LED that I was seeing that was working was a red one in the corner where the VRMs are. And I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. I contacted Asus, and sadly, the person on the phone from tech support wasn't really able to help me. He sent me a form for possibly doing an RMA. I filled it out. I sent it in, explaining what the problem was. Apparently, I wasn't explicit enough, or the phone technician didn't bother to include any notes from our conversation, because when I got the first response from Asus, they started talking about the router power connections. And I was like, I'm not talking about a router, I'm talking about the power supply. There's not even a router listed on my form. And it was just irritating. So then they wrote back and they said, check these things. I had already checked the things that they told me to check. And then they wrote back, okay, we're going to RMA your motherboard. Had they actually been trained to do the proper steps, complete proper steps, they would have discovered what I discovered a short time ago today. And that is that, now this is partially it's because I don't have a good eyes, and partially because I forgot exactly which was where. And also, once I had the motherboard inside and I wanted to double check, it was hard for me to see the tiny silkscreen writing on the edge of the motherboard because on like this. So imagine that this is a socket, or not socket, but the pins for connecting things, and they do all the silk screening and this is the very edge of the motherboard. If they do all the silk screening of which pins are for what down here at where the edge is, then you're not going to be able to see it very well once it's inside the motherboard. The case. But if they actually were smart, they would put silk screening on this side for the pins on this side, and silk screening on this side for the pins on this side, which is not what they did with this particular motherboard. Now, I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I just don't know what that good reason was exactly. It may have been components that were too close or something like that. It's not really something for me to answer. But so I thought, well, wait a second. I've checked everything else. Before I RMA this, I'm going to tear out all the components and start with just the power supply being connected to the motherboard in the two locations for the CPU and the motherboard itself. But before I do that, is there anything else I need to check that could possibly prevent power from getting to the computer? And then I realized that when I used the tester bypassed the power button. And basically it's a short that allows you to directly test just the connection from the power supply itself through the cable to the tester and back. It's just a loop. And since I had the CPU cables plugged in as well, so some power was going from that to the motherboard, and that probably spilled over somehow. So then I realized, wait a second, is it possible that I might have attached the power switch's two-prong socket to the wrong pins on the motherboard? And it was very hard to see. I needed a good lighting, which I fortunately have this ring light on a clip that I can put in many different places, and I needed to actually take my handy dandy magnifier and I needed to detach it, and this is one of the reasons I love this thing. I detached it from this, so this was my light source, and I used this to read, and I discovered that, lo and behold, I had indeed connected it to the wrong pair of pins. And that was all there was to it. Once I did that, it worked. It worked. It was like, yay, I figured it out, because I feel so bad for my niece. She has been waiting since Christmas, and then on her birthday, which was earlier this month, she was told about it, and she knew there was something. She didn't know what it was, because all I did for Christmas was give her a set with the keyboard, mouse, and the headset. And so she was really disappointed, because I gave her brother a whole bunch of stuff. And when I was told her, she was excited, but in a subdued kind of way. I was like, wow, I guess wow, okay. I'd really expected a more exuberant response, but we're all different. Sometimes people tell me stuff, and because of life experiences I've had that have informed me to refrain from being too exuberant until I see the proof, I don't always act as exuberantly as people think I'm going to. And I think that throws some people off, and so it threw me off when she did that. So I'm assuming that, she was like, at that point, was like maybe dubious that it was going to actually happen. But it did, or it will, I should say. And I'm really excited, because now I get to continue. So what I want to do right now is I just want to briefly show you, because I've changed the power supply to the 750 GT, the EVGA Supernova 750 GT Gold, because in looking at it, I realized, number one, it's fully modular, which makes it a little bit easier to deal with. especially in a smaller case. So I won't have to work quite so hard to get it all put together. But number two, she didn't need all the extra sockets that the Supernova 850GQ has. So it was kind of pointless to give her the extra 100 watts and all the extra sockets because she's never going to need them. So I decided, okay, I'll give her the 750 instead because it makes a lot of sense. So I swapped that. So let's take a look right now. And so we've got, and when you can do it like this. You know, last time I had it partially in the case and I was showing you as I plug things in, but you can do it like this. And some power supplies have the lock always on the bottom. Some supplies will have the bottom row with the locks on the bottom and the top row with the locks on the top, which is more sensible because it makes it a lot easier to get them out. But not all companies will do that. So, which is kind of dumb. But yeah, whatever. So when you're plugging it in, try to do it in a way that makes it easier for you to, number one, plug things in. Number two, however, thinking about which side of the power supply, here or here I mean, is going to be back deep down inside of there that you're not going to be able to access it so easily. So you'll want to use the sockets that are in that side first. So we've got a SATA 1 and SATA 2, and so instead of plugging into SATA 2, I plugged it into SATA 1. I didn't have choice with the Molex one, the peripheral, and CPU 1 and 2. Technically, I didn't have to connect this one unless she's going to be using overclocking, which I doubt she'll do. But I decided, well, better safe than sorry, so I don't have to be hassled by it later on. And then there are two VGAs, so I plugged it into the left-hand one because, again, this is going to be easier to access than this. If it's plugged into here, then this one's very hard to access and see and get it plugged in properly. Believe me, I've tried. So if we follow these through, we can see that these two go up into that hole there, and that goes directly to the CPU socket that's on the other side of the motherboard. And then we can look at this VGA one that's going through there, and on the other side, that is going, oh, you're upside down to there. So the CPU ones are down there. And then we have the peripheral, which is connected to this little special fan setup over here for these Yeon fans that I've installed in the front with their little red lights because my niece thought that would be really cool to have red lights in the front behind this door for a little bit of a dark touch to it because, you know, she likes a Nightmare Before Christmas, I think it's called. And then we've got the SATA one, and that goes through here to the optical drive. And I wanted to point out that you can see here that I've got a SATA connection that's still available here and also here. And the reason for that is more than likely if I need to use this SATA cable again, whatever I plug in that's going to be SATA is going to be in the back somewhere. So it's much better for me to have it these two plugs available here rather than having them stick out on the other side. So I did it that way. And then I did the same thing with the Molex. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't plug in these. These are an alternative power source, or you could even daisy chain a Molex fan here. And there's no need for those to be powered because if I power the fans from here and from here, it's probably going to destroy them because that's two sources of power, so you're getting double the power being sent to the fans. So there's no need to use them, don't need to daisy chain them or anything like that. And then if I need to power something else, if it's over in this area here with the Molex, then I have these two right here. If by chance I end up installing something over on this side, then I can always easily unplug this from here and then use the furthermost one here and plug this one into the device over there, or alternatively, I could just leave it like it is and it can still reach. It's not like it's not long enough. So now I'm going to just tidy this up, and after I put this inside, so we can move forward with this. And since you've already seen what that means, I will not bore you with it. All right, so I know people are going to be like, oh my God, that looks horrible, Glenn. How can you have this sticking outside of this one? Why didn't you tuck it under behind it? And why didn't you do this and that? And look, okay, it's not the part of the computer that people are going to see. You don't need to obsess about it. All you gotta do is make sure that everything is safe and tied down so that it's not going to prevent you from putting the back cover on or closing a door if there's a door. And some of the systems that companies have out there for cable management actually make it harder to close up the case, because the cables are condensed into one bulky area that pushes out beyond the confines. Now this I can push against, so it's not important. I can rearrange it, but when I was working in my Corsair 5000X, it was just this one central place for most of the cabling to go, and it was sticking out so far I actually had to make a change to the door that covers it for aesthetic reasons, by adding a magnet that would grab onto the standoff that stuck out of the back, in order to make sure it would stay closed so I could get the glass panel on over it. Which, why is there a glass panel? I don't know. I would prefer that either there's no glass panel and no door, or there's a glass panel and no door. Not this weird combination that they've got that absolutely, to me anyways, doesn't make sense. Anyways, so this is done. I've got it plugged in. You can see that. And this one is ready to power up, so let's give it a try. All right, so here we go. Are you ready?
Aye, aye, Captain.
1, 2, 3. Eh? Eh? Oh, power switch. And so you can see the 2 red fans that she requested. You can see the lights are on in the back there. Fantastic. The fans over here are working. The fans here are working. On top, they're working. Everything's doing what it's supposed to do. Let's take a look at these front fans as far as the speed switches. So there's an off, apparently in the middle, or it goes, yep, it's off. And then there's another speed there, and can't really tell which. I think that's a slower speed because the light is dimmer and it doesn't feel as strong. And then let's try this bottom one. And that's, yeah, it's definitely slow speed now. So both of these are in the up position. The fans are not as bright, and they're running slower but much more quietly. And there we go. So as you can see, the power directly affects both the fan speed and the lights. And now we've got everything running. So what's the next step? The next step is, well, for some people would be to tidy this up further. They'd figure out a way to make this look better. We might want to get something to support this so it doesn't sag. But most importantly is, I want to point out that when you have connections like this, you do not want to crimp it or twist it to minimize the amount of exposed cabling, because one of two things can happen. You can break the wiring inside of these individual wires here, or you can damage the socket on the card, or you can actually crack the card itself. Same thing is true with the motherboard and all the other devices. You want to be careful not to twist or pull or turn things too hard, even if it's like bothering you aesthetically, you're going to have to figure out another solution because the choices might lead you to actually breaking something. So now that we've got it working, let's go ahead and I'm going to get the a keyboard and mouse plugged into it and see how that works. Right, so I'm going to plug those in, and we're going to continue on the next video with having the keyboard, mouse, and monitor plugged in. Now I'm going to use my own keyboard and mouse since I gave my niece her keyboard and mouse and headset, and but we'll be using her Dell monitor that I got for her. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.